chat, someone's saying many people nowadays in Germany would argue that the reason cutting hands is acceptable is that it is against basic human rights, which are agreed upon and should never be abolished or even touched under any circumstances in order to ensure a minimum level of security and order. And as far as I know, human rights are not the result of hedonistic or utilitarian philosophy. So how would you respond to cutting hands in regard to human rights?
No, the human rights, it was something that was actually mentioned by, can you still see me, by the way? Hello?
Yes, we see you.
Yeah. Human rights was mentioned by, Jeremy Bentham. But at that time, they were called natural rights, not human rights. And he called them nonsense on stilts. It's a very famous quote of Jeremy Bentham. He said it's like nonsense on stilts. Human rights is based on liberalism. It is directly based on liberalism. But more specifically, it's based on how these individuals in the UN at that time decided would be the 30 most important human rights. Now, who was there in the room that day? You know, when they decided, when they drafted it, who wrote the 30 articles of the Human Rights Convention? It must have been a person. It was actually a group of people, white people. All of them are white. I don't know if there was a single black person there. And there were Americans for the most part who had just won the war. I mean, you have to understand something. The UN was before called the League of Nations, okay? And then they transformed, or they changed their name to the UN. So these people, they came together and they said, these white people said, these are the 30 articles and we will vote on them. And as you may know, the UN has a disproportionate system in terms of whose votes counts and whose votes don't count. And there's a lot of literature on this. It's not the case. So we have 196 countries in the world, yeah? Today we have 196 countries in the world. And not all of them have a say in the UN. You have the Security Council, and America has the biggest say in the UN. Even though it has, you know, proportionately smaller populations than, for example, India and China, it has a much bigger say than India and China, even till today. So it wasn't Indians and Chinese people deciding what is human rights. It was American people deciding what was human rights. It's not agreed upon just because the Americans decided to say it and some people decided to agree to it for the sake of convenience. And because they just came out of a very heavy war that destroyed the world's economy and killed 200 million people or whatever it was. That doesn't mean that now it's become the haqq, the truth, just because there's some kind of agreement here. I mean, you will know that Germany, I don't know when it ended paying for its debts in repatriations to the English. I think it was quite recent, actually. They were paying money. They were humiliated.
Yes.
You know? So at the end of the day, if someone says, well, this is against human rights, say, well, who wrote human rights? Were there any women there? Were there any black people there? Were there any Arabs there that were writing that? So no, actually there was not. So you say, look, it's very not inclusive. I thought you were liberal. I thought you believed in diversity and inclusion. It excluded. Probably there was no gay people even there that were there doing that. On their paradigm, it's very not inclusive. It's lack of diversity. So, okay. So just because these people decided that these are the 30 articles of human rights, it doesn't mean that it's the correct thing. By the way, interestingly, that there is a book because there's a guy, he's a non-Muslim, his name is Peter Moskos, okay? And you'll be shocked. It's a book called In Defense of Flogging. In Defense of Flogging. Jald, you know, whipping. You know, in Islamic law, there's some crimes where you get whipped.
Whipping.
Yeah, so this is a book called In Defense of Flogging. And this guy who's not even a Muslim, he's making the case that, you know, flogging is important because of prison. This is what he says. Look, Let me go to his blurb. It says, this is what it says on his blurb. Peter Moskos presents us with a true dilemma, the dreadful alternatives of prison or flogging. For us to make that stark and Swiftian choice, he compels us to rethink our ideas of cruel and humane, barbaric and civilized, progressive and reactionary. It is invariably jarring to overcome a prejudice or abandon a dearly held belief. I try to avoid either, but Moskos makes it an intriguing, if unsettling, experience. This is one of the reviews of his book. It's really interesting. You should read that book because this guy is not even coming from the Islamic paradigm. If you look in the works of sociology, like one of the major things about justice systems that have been consistently effective has been like deterrence. Even Emil Durkheim speaks about that. So it's been consistently effective. And if you look at the alternatives, there's lots of havoc that is created because of a lack of law, deterrent type law. People are just like, we live in London. I don't know how it is. Are you in Berlin or what place are you in again?
We're in Aachen.
Aachen,
City called Aachen, yes.
Aachen. Yeah. So I don't know if there's gangs in the area. Is there gangs and stuff like that?
Not really, no.
No. Okay. In London, there's lots of stabbing going on. These guys, they don't care. Like you'll see a video every day, almost every day, there's someone getting killed.
Weird in the news, yes.
Yeah, I mean, the reason why they're doing it is because no one's doing anything to them. The government is just allowing them to run the streets. Yes.
Aachen is gang city.
The gang city is the biggest gangster of all is Ahmed Siddiq.
That means there are no gangs in Aachen.
You got it all under control there, do you? Yeah, so deterrents are important, man. And get that book, is interesting. You read it, it'll show you that.
Just to say, flogging means auspeitschen in German. So if someone doesn't know understand the
how do you say that? Auspeitschen.
Auspeitschen, which means really, taking the
Auspeitschen.